let's go over an application that I have, and we'll try to look at how we can integrate Python's logging framework into the application. A typical enterprise application will have multiple packages and multiple Python modules under it. I've tried to mimic a design or a project structure similar to a typical enterprise Python application here with some modules. The first module I have is, I've called it math_util.py. It has a method which can add two numbers, and as you can see here, I have some print statements here telling me that I'm entering this method, adding the two numbers, then displaying the result. Then I'm also printing that I'm leaving the method. Here I have another Python module called date_util.py, and under this method I'm just printing out what day is today and what time it is. And any enterprise Python application will have a main method from where everything gets invoked, and in this case, for this example, which I'm calling as Python_logging_example, app.py happens to be that main entry point where I welcome the user of the application, provide them with a bunch of choices, which is to add two numbers or to find out what day it is today, or to exit the application. So that's pretty much the logic I have right now, and I'm using print statements everywhere. I'll run this application and then we will try to integrate Python's logging framework and get rid of the print statements and in all the modules, and replace them with Python's logging framework, so that whatever we print in our modules go into either one file through the loggings file handler or to the console through the console handler. Okay, first we will run this plain vanilla application and see how it behaves. So here we go. So I ran app.py and it throws these options at me. Welcome to the application. What do we want to do? Let's say I want to add two numbers. Here I've already supplied, hard-coded the numbers to be 5 and 6. And it enters that application like I mentioned. It shows the result of adding 5 and 6 and it leaves the application. Let's say now we want to go with the second option. So here it entered the application. So the print statements are getting printed here through the stream into the terminal. I'm using PyCharm for this example. So now let's go ahead and see how we can integrate Python's logging framework, which is a built-in module in Python, to log into one file. You may have hundreds of modules in your enterprise Python application, but you may want to log everything into one file. And you may want to log them for debugging purposes into the console as well. So we'll look at that. So let me go ahead and create a file, call it log_util, and in that I'll import Python's logging. Let me create a logger and I'm going to call it let me create a method. So the idea behind this is, before even I get going with the coding, we have to instantiate a logger class using the logging framework, logging module that Python provides, and invoke that in your app method. And as long as in each of the individual modules you invoke your logger with the same name, then it gets implemented as a singleton and things get written to the same file or to the console. Okay, we will see this in detail. So I will create a function, call it getLogger. All it does is instantiate a logger from the logging framework, logging.getLogger. I'll give it a name. I'll call it custom logger. Okay, and let's set the log level for this logger to be debug, which is the most verbose level. The order of logging in a typical application would be debug at the very lowest level, followed by info, followed by 1 followed by error and then critical. We'll see how this gets filtered a little later. So there are some things that we want to do. We will create a console handler, then we will create a file handler, then we'll create a formatter. Console handler will take care of logging anything that we write as part of this application into the console. File handler will take care of writing that to a file. Formatter will decide how you want the lines to be written, with timestamps, with module names, so on and so forth. So we'll create a formatter and we will then assign everything over to the logger. Okay, let's get going and create the console handler. Console handler is equal to logging dot stream handler. Okay, then we'll create a file handler. And before we do that, let me create a file name. So for that, I want to create a file name with a suffix of the timestamp of when this application runs. So for that, let me import datetime. And let me create a file. Use the format string here. Let's call it log app, or let's give it custom app or app1. Let's call it app1 dot underscore datetime dot now dot str of time. Then you provide y percentage m percentage d percentage h s h m s. Alright, should have been single quote here, not double quote. And we'll have dot log after that. So this will be the name that will be created and used. So we'll use that file name in our file handler. So we are creating logging.file handler with this name, and the mode is going to be append. So all the modules will use one file with this name, and anything that we log in each of the individual modules will all go into one file. So let's go ahead. So we created a console handler, we created a file handler at this stage. Let's create a formatter which decides how every line gets logged. So for that, there is another method, logging dot formatter, and it takes a bunch of inputs which you can read about. I'm just going to copy it. I have it handy here and paste it here. So this will be printing the time. Every line that you print using logger.info or logger.debug will come with this prefix of the time it was printed in, the name of the module, the level being one of these levels, and the actual message itself. Okay, now that we have that, let's add the formatter to let's set this formatter for both our console handler and file handler. Now let's add each of the console handler and the file handler to a logger object. and this method would return the logger that we just instantiated. We created a console handler and a file handler that gets returned as part of this method. Now let's go to our main function, and here from src.log_util that we just created, we'll get this is what we are interested in, and here we will instantiate our logger. Logger is equal to get logger. So as soon as your main application loads, your logger will be instantiated. Now how do I make sure that all my modules end up logging into the same file handler or the console handler? So for that, like I was mentioning earlier, you'll have to use the same name that you have used in this method, which is custom logger. So let's go to math util. So this will change. So we will import login. Logger is equal to logging.getLogger custom logger, right? So after this method, we just have to replace the logger. So let this be debug. Entering and leaving are not particularly important from a developer perspective. So these will be at the very highest level, the lowest level. If you want debug level logging, that is when you would possibly print this. The sum of the numbers is something that I would want to print by default, so I'll leave it with info, logging.info, and leaving the method itself can also be a debug level logging, right? So we changed everything and we integrated it with the logger object. Let's do the same for the other module. Even this module is writing something in. Logger is equal to logging.getLogger custom logger. Alright, we are giving the same name, custom logger, and custom logger in all three places. In case for some reason you don't want to use the custom logging and you want to do something on your own, in that case you will just give it a different name. Let's say the name of the module can also be used. Okay, so with that, it's the same thing. This will be logger.debug. This will be logger.info. And this will be logger.debug again. Alright, let's give it another spin. I just had to terminate and restart it. So let's run the application again. Now we want to add two numbers. So here we go. Everything is getting printed here. The logs that are in debug level and the info level as well. We are entering the method, adding the two numbers, displaying the result, and leaving it. Now let's see what day it is today. That is number 2. So we entered the method again, and today happens to be Thursday, August. Okay, there's some problem with the formatting, but that's not part of our problem. The way I've used strf time is not right. Maybe I ended up using something odd here, but for the intent of this demonstration, we'll just stick to logging. So the message got logged into the console, and we are leaving that method. Now the next option I want to choose is, what I want to do next is 3, exit the application. So as soon as I exited, here you see that log file got created. Similar to what you see here, these 6 lines also got logged to this file. So from multiple modules within this Python application, we are able to log into one single file for the lifetime of that application. Now let's see if we want to, what happens if I change the log level from debug to info. Like I was mentioning earlier, this is the order. So if I set it to info, the debug messages should no longer come up. Let's give it a spin and see if that actually is the case. So just to jog our memory, we have debug statements here with some irrelevant messages like entering and leaving the application. So let's give it another spin and see what happens now. So we'll add the two numbers 5 and 6. So this time we only got message which is with the log level of info, right? Let's choose 2. Here again we got only the info message, and we'll exit the application, which should create another log which should be significantly different from what we had earlier, which was this with debug messages. Hope this was useful. Thank you.